And here it is, your most recent college football playoff ranking number 4. And we got some movement. Not at number 1, though. Georgia, 11-0, still top of the crop. At number 2, the Buckeyes jumping 2 spots into the 2 spot, jumping over Alabama, who also did win in Week 12. But committee telling you right now, it's got to look good, too. And it looked real good when it comes to the Buckeyes a week ago. Cincinnati, there they are, finally on the inside of the conversation with Oregon, dropping way down the board to number 11. They were previously number 3. Now out of the question, and the answer to that question is Cincinnati. For more on CFP ranking number 4, we welcome in a pair of number 1s. CBS Sports ranking analyst Jerry Palm and our college football insider, big game Dennis Dodd. Gentlemen, there it is right out in front of us, 1 through 4 and beyond. Let's dive right in here with Ohio State, making that 2-spot jump up to number 2. A 49-point win over a top 10 team. What does this tell you about how the committee's valuing things this season, Dennis?
Well, this is the biggest jump they've made all season, and I think we were all season with Ohio State. They were putting up points, but ... after every game. They gave up 31 and 477 yards to Purdue. They were having convincing wins, but in terms of the big picture, which you also always have to evaluate Ohio State by, were they a complete team? And now that's reflected tonight by the ranking they're getting from the committee. But look, they're going to play Michigan, so you can take that spot in the top 4 and give it to whoever wins that game. Unless the Big 12 champion ends up with 2 losses or more, i.e. Wisconsin, then the Big 10 is going to be in the top 4. So, that argument is only for tonight. We're going to have results over Saturday, which is probably going to decide things further. But I think right now you can probably pencil in the Big 10, Michigan or Ohio State in the top 4 in some form.
Yeah, Ohio State really showed, their peak form against the number 7 team in the country. And the committee acknowledged that. Yeah, and if you remember last week when Gary Barta was talking to the media afterwards, he said that they had a strong debate for the second spot among Alabama, Oregon, and Ohio State last week. Well, Oregon played their way out of it. And if you were really close on those teams going into this week, Ohio State made a very clear case to be the number 2 team this week. But it's like Dennis said, it doesn't really matter. Now, I'm going to take some issue with what you said earlier about who controls their own destiny. There are 4 teams: Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan. That's it. Everybody else, Cincinnati, the Big 12 teams, those teams can win out and still not make it. So, those 4, though, they control their own destiny in this thing. And that's been the case for quite some time. And we're going to get to see the Ohio State-Michigan game this week. We're going to get to see the Alabama-Georgia game next week. We could end up with 3 playoff teams out of those 4, or we could end up conceivably with just 1 if Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan all end up with 2 losses.
I love when we get these 2 together. They hold each other accountable, and they always bring the best information to us here on HQ. Guys, we got to talk about Cincinnati, because you said something very interesting right there, JP. Cincy's been going about their business, and you can only ignore them for so long at 11-0. The chips have finally fallen their way with Oregon stepping aside. They do become the first group of 5 team to appear in the top 4. JP, you say they don't control their own destiny here. They win out. How does the committee say no to an undefeated Cincinnati team after putting them in the 4th CFP ranking?
Because they reevaluate every week, and Cincinnati's schedule is significantly worse than everybody they're competing with. And all of these teams that they're competing with are going to be improving their schedules because they're playing the best teams in their leagues, which are much better leagues. Now, Cincinnati is also playing the second best team in their league in the conference championship game, but that's a Houston team that's ranked near the bottom of these rankings. Now, the fact that Houston is in the rankings is helpful, but if you have a 12-1 Oklahoma State and a undefeated Cincinnati, and you've got a 1-loss Big Ten champion, and you've got 1-loss Georgia and 1-loss Alabama, all 3 of those teams are in. The committee's making a decision between a 12-1 Big 12 champion and an undefeated Cincinnati team that played a much worse schedule. but has that big win over Notre Dame. I think Cincinnati gets in, but I think it's premature to say that they control their own destiny.
Yeah, totally agree. I've been saying this for weeks. I said it in the last segment. If it comes to that, it's going to be a decision between a one-loss Big 12 champion, and for the Big 12 purposes, they have to hope it's Oklahoma State right now. I know they're 7 and Oklahoma's 10, but if Oklahoma makes it, they will have come from 13. That's the lowest they've been since this thing started. So they are going to be a dark horse. That would be an upset for them to get in because only 2 teams have come from further back to get into the top 4. So think Oklahoma State. And that would have to be a decision. This is a historic night, guys. No group of 5 team has ever been this high, this late. And I think we have to have a serious discussion and hold the committee accountable and get them on record tonight, or try to get Gary Barta on record tonight. Of course, he won't, about what it's going to take for Cincinnati. Jerry mentioned the schedule strength, which is not good. But do they value a Power 5 champion with 1 loss, and it would be from the Big 12, better than an undefeated team from the group of 5, which has gained, let's not forget, this New Year's 6 bid, this automatic bid in 5 of the 7 years of the CFP. So we're not talking about the Sun Belt going undefeated. We're not talking about UTSA going undefeated. We're still talking about Cincinnati, who passes the eye test in many, many ways and has stumbled only twice, just a little bit, and that was against Navy and that was against Tulsa. Nobody except Georgia and even Ohio State obviously had a loss, has been this consistent throughout the whole year. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. Somebody has to ask Gary Barta what it's going to take tonight.
All right. So,
I can tell you his answer.
Jerry?
We don't look ahead. That's
right,
bad,
exactly.
and they don't look ahead. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's not an unfair answer. It's not his job to project. That's my job, and maybe yours, but it's not his job to project. So he's not going to answer that question. But the key for Cincinnati is the fact that they've got the win at Notre Dame. I mean, they need Notre Dame to beat Stanford. They need that win to look as good as it possibly can when the committee's evaluating them. That is a huge, huge thing for Cincinnati that no group of 5 team has ever had before the committee. It's the reason they are where they are. It's the reason they have possible opportunities ahead of them. But they've got to take care of their business, and they still need to look good doing it. They don't want to be in a position where they're giving the committee an excuse to put a 12-1 Oklahoma or a 12-1 Oklahoma State ahead of them.
All right, so our guys advising Cincinnati, take some pictures while you're inside the club because the party might not last. My job here at HQ is to ask you guys the questions and get the information out of you. I got a couple questions when it comes to Michigan. They're in prime position right now to sneak in pending a decision or pending a Cincy misstep, but it's all pending what happens on Saturday. The question here is, do they have enough to do what they have not done in 7 seasons and never before under their current head coach, that is beat the Buckeyes, Jerry?
Well, maybe, but I'm not buying it until I see it. They have played, though, very well. They have home field advantage, but they are still not more talented than Ohio State. Ohio State is the most talented team in the Big Ten, and there's a gap. And maybe Michigan is second, but, Ohio State's got their number. Jim Harbaugh has yet to win the game that he was hired to win. This might be his best chance, but until he actually does it, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, 2 things. This is the best team that Jim Harbaugh's had. This is his 4th year out of 7. He's won 10 games. And I think after what happened last year, the 2-4 record, tying the worst of his career, at least in winning percentage, he's rebounded nicely. It's a complete team. Cade McNamara is no longer a game manager. They run the ball well. Josh Gaddis has done well as the offensive coordinator. They have a plan. But I think what changes the entire thinking, as Jerry mentioned, is Ohio State's total performance last week. Do I think Michigan has the goods? Absolutely, I think they have the goods. But there's a historical perspective here. Ohio State had won 8 in a row by an average of almost 3 touchdowns. Michigan hasn't been competitive since the 4th down game in 2006, the 4th down spot where they lost in overtime. That has to change. I think it will change. Ohio State, I think, a 7-point favorite in this game. Jerry mentioned the home field advantage. A little bit of weather, high of 36. Don't know about wind in Ann Arbor Saturday. I am picking Ohio State. But right now, as far as the rankings go, Ohio State is Michigan and Michigan is Ohio State. Whoever that wins that game is going to be in the top 4 if they take care of business. Right now, slight lean Ohio State.
Yeah, winner of that one will also represent the East in the Big Ten championship game. And again, Ohio State, they've won 15 of the last 16 meetings between those two. We do have to talk about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish as well, because when you talk about Cincinnati and their weakness of schedule, the best strength of schedule out of any team in the top 10 belongs to the Fighting Irish. They also have a bullet point that the committee does not take into account, and that's the best loss. If you're going to consider Cincinnati a top 4 team, they have a loss to a top 4 team. They cruised since that loss to Cincinnati. What is the road ahead, Dennis, for the Fighting Irish if they want to see themselves on the inside? Yes, you have to take care of Stanford, and then you wait and see what happens on Conference Championship Saturday. But as for the Fighting Irish and their prospects moving forward, Dennis, what's it going to take for them to end up in the Final Four?
Yeah, beat Stanford and hope for a loss from Cincinnati and hope for a 2-loss champion from the Big 12. I don't see many other ways for them to get in unless the Big Ten champion has at least 2 losses. And that could be Wisconsin, that could be Ohio State or Michigan. And that's a big ask for Notre Dame to get in there. That's assuming Georgia's in, which I am, because all they have to do is beat Georgia Tech, and they are absolutely in. And unless Alabama beats Georgia, that takes away another spot. So they have to hope for something that hasn't happened this season. Cincinnati losing and chaos at the top with the Big 12, basically.
Yeah, Dennis is right about this. I mean, Notre Dame doesn't have the advantage of being a conference champion, which is one of the things that this committee values and has been instructed to value by the people who formed this committee, is that conference championships should matter. Now, they're not out to select the top 4 conference champions, but if you're talking about tiebreaker scenarios, conference championship is basically your first tiebreaker, and that's just something Notre Dame will never have. I mean, you talk about the strength of their schedule, it's a little deceiving because the top end of their schedule is Cincinnati, and Wisconsin has come on, and Purdue's come on a little bit, but they haven't got the big opponent other than Cincinnati. What they have is a lot of middle and not much of a bottom. So their strength of schedule ranks higher, but the actual quality on that schedule compared to Notre Dame is probably not as high as that ranking would indicate.
I mean, can we talk about 5 automatic bids? I mean, Power 5, conference champion, give me an automatic. It's a different conversation for a different day, gentlemen. This is how things, Dennis doesn't want it. I mean, how crazy of a day would that be? Conference championship Saturday, everybody's got to punch a ticket.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.